Welcome to my shop. My name's Guy, and this is the third video I'm doing of building a floating hall table. If you've missed the previous episodes, I'll leave a link in the corner so you can catch up to where we are now. This time I'm going to be making the beading that goes on the bottom of the apron and also on the front of the drawer, and I'm going to cut into that drawer for that beading to sit into. And then I'm going to make this, which is the top, which has this nice inlay that goes all around it that I totally screw up. So stick around. Well, these strips of walnut have been planed down to 1/4 of an inch thick. And what's going to happen with these is I'm going to make the beading that goes both around the drawer face and around the apron itself. So I've got a 1/4 inch round over bit, actually a 1/4 inch beading bit in my router table here. It's set to the right height. I've got some feather boards to keep it flat against the table and flat against the fence. I just need to push it through. I've got the 2 strips milled here. And I've got more than enough here. I'm not going to use all of this, absolutely not. But I want to make sure I have extra consistent material in case I break something, especially that bend around the apron. So looking at this right here on this side has the most consistent straight grain without any knots on it. So I need to rip off here 1/4 of an inch, and that'll go around the outside of the apron. Now for the cock beading of the drawers, I'm going to use this piece, and I need to cut off 1/2 inch. I'm getting ready to cut the rabbet that's going to be in the front for the cock beading. It needs to be 1/4 inch deep by 1/4 inch wide, and I'm doing this a little bit different than traditional cock beading is done. I've got a dado stack set up in my table saw with an auxiliary fence. I've got 1/4 inch above and 1/4 inch out. So I'm going to cut the ends first, and I'm going to use a miter gauge to help keep it stable. But I just want to make sure that I always keep the drawer face against the fence for the best results, the most consistent results. So here's that rabbet I made with the table saw on the face of the drawer. And here's that beading I made previously. And that's just going to go in there like that. It's pretty flush with this. It's actually a little proud. That's the way I want it because I got to flush it to that. And that'll give me a nice bead detail on the front of the drawer. Pardon that noise in the background. That's my furnace going off. It's a little cold out this morning. Anyhow, so after a few passes on my shooting board, I've got this piece perfect. So I just need to keep going around the rest of the piece and getting all of them fitted. Alright, so after about 20 minutes of fiddling with this and with the shooting board, I've got some really nice tight miters on it. So I just need to mark where these go and take it all apart. So I've mixed up some dye, and this is dark brown, and I've made it as dark brown as I can really get it. I put about 3 times the normal amount in. So this is the look I'm looking for right here, the color I'm looking for. It's very dark, and that's going to be a nice complement to the cherry. So what I want to do is I want to get some of that on all the pieces of cock beading here. Don't need to flood it on, but I just need to get it wet, and I may have to do it twice. So the first coat is drying on these smaller pieces, and I'm going to have to go back and add another coat to it. I'll probably have to add more after I apply these pieces and plane them flush, but I'd rather get the bulk of it done now before I attach them to the drawer front. Well, I've given these some time to dry and came out pretty good, so I'm just going to take some glue here and I'm going to start spreading it out. Don't need a lot, just spread it nice and thin. Now I've got that spread on there, I can put the first piece in place. Move it side to side a little bit. Make sure I've got really good coverage all the way around. I'm going to take one of the pieces here. Make sure that corner is lined up exactly where I need it to be. I'm going to take some blue tape. Now I've got that first piece on, I can go and add the rest of the pieces. Well, after removing that material, obviously it's not the color it should be anymore. It should be dark like it is on the front. So what I've got to do is I want to make sure that when I re-dye this piece, it doesn't leak over into here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some masking tape and I'm going to tape off the walnut side itself. I've got this all masked off now, and I've got some shellac. I'm just going to go ahead and try to seal this wood so the dye doesn't penetrate where I don't want it to. I've already done the sides of the drawer. Now I'm getting ready to do the top. And I'm just going to use this brush. Probably should have an artist brush, not an acid brush, but I've cleaned off as much of the flyers as I possibly could. Basically what I have to do is just paint this. You don't want to put any masking tape on here because if the stain goes underneath there, the dye goes underneath there, it'll actually make it worse. So I just need to be real careful and paint this dye on as close to the edge as I can get it. That was a little bit tedious, but it came out really nice. That dye, once it hits a wood fiber, it tends to expand quite a bit. So I got pretty lucky, and a nice steady hand and a little bit of patience, and payoff was good on it. I'm going to attach this molding to the bottom of the case. I'm just going to use some glue and spread it on the case, put it on, and then hold it on with some spring clamps. Well, I've got the molding on there and it seems pretty tight. I've got very little squeeze out, which was my goal. So I just have to let this set up now. Well, I got the clamps off the beading detail and it came out really, really nice. I cleaned up all the glue squeeze out. There's just a little bit along these edges right here. And with the drawer in there, that's a really nice look. That's exactly what I was looking for. These are the two boards I'm going to make the top out of, and I'm pretty lucky. These came out of the same tree. Actually, they were sequentially cut from the same tree, so this is basically a book match. I've got a really nice grain pattern, really good color match. I've got these knots and the small bark inclusion to deal with, but that's okay. That adds a little bit of visual interest to it. So I need to cut these down to length and width and glue them together and make a top. So the top's all glued up. It's really nice and flat. Came out really, really well. I've already got all the glue squeeze out cleaned up. I'm going to go ahead and let this sit for a while, and when it's done, we will continue working on it. I'm getting ready to rough cut the curved edges of the piece. The total width on this is going to eventually be 13 1/4. Right now it's 13 1/2. I have to keep a little meat back here so I have a point to put my trammel in for the router, so when I fair this curve I can cut that off later. So I've got the pivot point set up for my router trammel. I'm just going to put that on there and fair this curve. This line is going to help me for the setup for the router for when I do the inlay on the top here. It's set 3/4 of an inch back, and it gives me a stopping point on both of the curved edges, and it also is going to help me set up the router with the jig. So my router's set up with an edge guide and an 1/8 inch down cut spiral bit. I want to use down cut because I don't want the wood fibers being pulled up and giving me a ragged edge. So I've got it set to cut about 3/32 of an inch or so, and I'm going to do the back edge first. I'm getting ready to cut the inlay that goes around the front of the piece, and I had to make a couple changes. First of all, I had to scab this piece of wood on the end of it here. The edge of the piece is about right here, because when the edge guide goes past this, there's nothing to support it and it'll just fall in. I also had to take the router edge guide and remove the flat piece and replace it with these 2 round pads. That'll enable me to follow around the curve. So this is some epoxy, and I put some dye in there, and I just need to go around and fill this. I'll probably need to make more epoxy. This is probably not near enough, but just need to go around this and take my time and fill that in. I've got all the epoxy in, and I've also filled in some holes that were there, a couple knots. So I'm going to let this sit for about a half hour, maybe an hour, and I'm going to come back and take a look at it and make sure that it hasn't sunk, because it will. And then I might have to put some more in. I want to make sure that the epoxy dries proud of the surface. So when I scrape it off, it'll be level with the surface. So I got all the epoxy off, and I've run it through the drum sander, and I don't know if you can see this right here. Now, I've used the dyed epoxy before, I don't know, 3 or 4 times in a very similar situation to this, and I've never had this happen. But the dye from the epoxy is actually soaked into the end grain on this curved part. It's fine on the straightaways, but not on this curved piece. Bottom line is this piece is ruined. The other side doesn't look very good. I don't like the way the grain matches on it, so I've got to start from scratch. So there's the new top. It's not as pretty as the first piece was, but it's still pretty darn good.